This is Judy Sedgman, and this is a unit in this series of modules that really means a lot to me because it addresses something that's so fundamental to our peace of mind. It addresses the nature of love as an unconditional feeling. And I've been so fortunate that my dear friend and colleague, whom you've seen in earlier modules in this course, has agreed to join us for this one and talk about his understanding of love and understanding as the companions that really draw us to our peace of mind. So with that, I don't need to say too much more. Bill is extremely well known in this work. He's a wonderful psychiatrist. He's helped so many people. I've known him for a long, long, long time. And he's a beautiful soul, and I'm really happy to be able to bring you Bill.
Thank you, Judy. The feeling's mutual as far as respect and caring, and I appreciate you even asking me. My wife, Linda, asked Mr. Banks one time, said, Sid, is love enough? People talk about love being the curative agent, and Sid got quiet, and after a little bit he said, Linda, love and understanding are enough. And I thought I understood. I think it's so many things you start to see that there's levels of understanding of things. I think we've all experienced that with the three principles, that 6 months after I was exposed to the three principles in 1983, I thought I knew the principles. And then 6 months later, I thought, no, now I know the principles. And 35 years later, I know that I'm still a student of the principles. So I know that I had some understanding that love and understanding, what that meant. But not too long ago, a few months ago, I was flying back from the Midwest, and I chose a movie called Thank You for Your Service. And it was a movie about 5 Iraq veterans from based on a true story of 5 men who came back from the same unit in Iraq. And I won't go through the details. You can imagine the difficulties they had when they came back. They'd been in really heavy combat and lost companions, etc. And they had marked difficulties. And again, I won't go into the details, but you can imagine them. We still have, I think, a veteran dying by suicide, I think, every 22 seconds. It's a horrific number. And we've lost at least 5 times as many from Vietnam by suicide as we have as we lost on the ground. And so I was watching this video in this movie, and suddenly at some point I realized, oh my gosh, I see now that there's love without understanding, and then there's love with understanding. But love is always there. Our connection to the divine, our connection to pure love at the source of the universe is always there. But if we lack understanding, it's difficult for us to access, express, experience it in its fullness. And I saw these soldiers, these beautiful men coming back from the craziness of war, and they had incredible love in their hearts. Incredible love for each other. Hell, they'd carried each other off the battlefield, injured, and it didn't matter whether the man was 40. They might complain about it weeks later or days later when he was okay, but at the time, it didn't matter that he weighed 40 pounds more than they did. They picked him up and carried him to safety under gunfire. And I saw these men, it wasn't just for each other. They loved their spouses they came back to. They loved their fiancés they came back to. They loved their children that they came back to. They loved their families, their parents. But they lacked understanding. They lacked understanding of what they are as human beings, that they're divine energy in disguise. And they lacked the awareness that they had divine wisdom available to them 24/7. Now, if people are offended by the word divine, then use something that you feel comfortable with. But there's not a human being that I know that hasn't had moments in their life where they suddenly knew exactly what to say or do, and they knew it was not coming from their intellect, it was coming through them. And lacking that understanding that we are experiencing life from birth to death, one thought at a time, and that we have access to a wisdom beyond the intellect, lacking that understanding, these men were at the mercy of their memories. They were at the mercy of their memories that, combined with the special effects of consciousness, looked real at times to them. They were at the mercy of things that they did that they wouldn't do except in the craziness of war, but they were unable to forgive themselves. They were at the mercy of things that other people did. They were at the mercy of things that happened around them, of losses, but the past, folks, I don't mean to lessen it in any way. It does not exist except as a memory trace. And in my experience in working with veterans for the last 30 some years from this perspective, once people have an understanding, they gain a certain level of understanding of what they are as human beings and where their experience is coming from. The most frightening flashback starts to lose its force field, speaking in Star Trek terms. I have a couple of children who are Trekkies, and so I find myself speaking of Star Trek terms. So once people understand that, they can have the most frightening flashbacks that would appear frightening to people, and they know that they are a bad commercial. They are no longer true. They do not exist except as a thought. And once people see that at a certain level of understanding, the force field starts to lose its power. And there comes a day that the memory gets triggered and there is no force field. That's the day that they stop having to avoid certain places to go, certain books, certain TV shows, certain movies, because they no longer have any fear of those memories being awakened. And they see psychological innocence. I don't have time to go in detail, but they see that every human being, given the level of understanding they have in the moment, is always doing the very best that they know how to do at that moment. So when I speak of love and understanding, that's my best 7-minute version of it.
That's beautiful.
Okay.
That's beautiful. No, I'm very grateful because I got a lot out of that. I really did. And it's funny because it